A paranormal romance audiobook. Mara Vale woke on the edge of a scream she did not let out. The room was dark enough to hide the corners, but not dark enough to hide the feeling that something had been in her bed with her. In the dream, fingers had wrapped around her throat with patient certainty, not choking her fast, not panicking, just claiming. A voice had leaned close to her ear, warm as breath and cold as iron, and whispered, "You are a key." She lay still and listened to her own pulse while the words stayed behind her eyes. Her hand rose slowly to her neck. No bruises, no broken skin, yet her throat burned as if a thin ring of heat had been pressed into her flesh. She swallowed and it hurt, not physically, not exactly. It hurt the way a memory hurt when it pretended to be a prophecy. The Umbral Order headquarters never slept. It only changed shifts, like a creature that kept its eyes open by rotating the lidless parts. Mara walked through the security corridor with her badge held steady and her expression blank. The walls were clean and expensive in a way that felt more threatening than decay. There were cameras, and then there were the other things. The wards that prickled at the edges of her senses. The silent checks that made her bones feel counted. At contract intake, the handler did not bother with a greeting. She slid a folder across the desk with a practiced motion, as if she were feeding an animal that might bite. "Delicate work, no blood," the handler said. Her voice was flat. The kind of flat that meant she had watched people beg in this room and had learned not to hear it. Mara opened the folder. The paper smelled faintly of ozone. A spell was sleeping in the ink, waiting to be acknowledged. She scanned the terms. Social engagement sabotage, high society, reputation management. Break the engagement cleanly, make the bride look endangered, make the groom look like a threat, but do not spill anything that could be traced back to the order. Freedom, the handler added, like she was offering a sweet. You want freedom, do what you are told. Freedom sounded like mockery in Mara's head, like a joke told by someone holding a chain. She forced a nod anyway. In this building, refusal did not lead to negotiation. It led to consequences that were explained later, when it was too late to resist. There was a line in the contract that tightened her stomach before she understood why. No physical involvement with the target. It was written like policy, but it read like humiliation prepared in advance. Like someone already knew what her body might betray and wanted to punish her for it before it happened. The client arrived in a perfumed hush, escorted by 2 order staff as if she were fragile porcelain and not a young woman with money sharp enough to cut. Veronica Pike smiled like a person who had never been told no and could not imagine it. Her dress was pale, expensive, and designed to suggest innocence while showing exactly how well she could afford it. "I need you to sabotage my engagement," Veronica said. She tilted her head as if she were asking for a favor, not buying a stranger's life for a week. "I want to be the victim. I want him to be the danger. I want everyone to watch and believe me." Mara kept her face calm. 100 questions pressed against her teeth. Why not simply break it off? Why drag witnesses into it? Why pay the Umbral Order? And then Veronica said the name, and Mara felt her body go still with the instinct of prey. Rowan Ashford. Even the handler's pen paused. The name carried weight in the city, the kind of weight that bent conversation around it. Royal Inquisitor. A man who investigated forbidden magic and made people disappear with paperwork and polite words. Rumors followed him like a second shadow, a blood curse, something old enough to have rules and hungry enough to break them. Veronica's smile sharpened, too even to be real. He is not human, Mara. He is a cage. The word cage hit something deep in Mara, something she did not have language for. She had been a cage of other people's contracts her whole life. A body rented, a talent owned, a girl raised in a home where being chosen meant being traded. Myra signed. The ink warmed under her fingers as if the page had a pulse. In the corridor outside, Lucian Crow intercepted her as if he had been waiting for the moment she would be alone. Head of the Umbral Order, beautiful in a way that never invited touch. His suit fit like armor. His eyes did not look at her the way men usually did. They looked through her like he was reading the lines of code someone else had written into her. "You crave danger," Lucian said. His voice was quiet, but it pressed against her skin. "I'll tear it out of you." Coldness was worse than shouting. Shouting at least acknowledged that you were human enough to make someone lose control. Lucian never lost control. That was the problem. "And do not forget who you belong to by contract," he added. His tone softened by a fraction, like a knife turned sideways before it slid in. Myra's throat tightened. She nearly said no one, but the lie would have hurt more than the truth. She kept her mouth shut and passed him, feeling his gaze follow the back of her neck. Ethan Cade met her in the prep room with a tablet in one hand and a small case in the other. Ethan was the kind of steady that made Chaos feel embarrassed. He did not look like danger. That was why the Order used him and why Mara trusted him more than she trusted the air. "New illusion lenses," Ethan said, "and a wardrobe tag list. You are Talia Dune now, beneficiary, charity home, grateful, quiet." Mara took the case. The lenses were thin as water and colder than they should have been. She slipped them in. The mirror changed. The woman looking back at her had flawless skin and soft eyes, a society version of vulnerability. The kind that made rich people feel kind when they pitied you. Mara stared until the reflection began to feel like a mask that might refuse to come off. "It is easier to be a mask than a person," she said before she could stop herself. Ethan's expression softened. "Do not forget there is still a person under it." That night, the Order hosted a private party in the Ravenna district. Officially, it was a morale event. Unofficially, it was a nerve check. The building glowed from inside like a lantern filled with secrets. Music drifted through corridors that were too polished. People laughed like they were practicing. Mara moved through the crowd with a drink she did not taste. She laughed when someone told a joke. She touched shoulders in greeting. Her body performed and her mind stayed somewhere else, in the old memory of a different party, years ago, when one mistake had turned a debt into a lifetime. The dance floor was crowded. Lights spun slow and seductive. Mara tried to keep to the edges, but the room had a way of bringing her to the center anyway. A man in a black mask stepped into her space and placed his hand on her waist without asking. The contact was firm, proprietary, as if she had been measured and assigned. The heat of his palm bled through fabric into her skin, and her stomach tightened with immediate, humiliating awareness. She looked up. Lucian Crow's eyes were the only part of his face she could see, and they were enough. He did not smile. He led, and her body followed before she gave it permission. The first turn was controlled, almost painful, forcing her to keep up or be dragged. He leaned close, his breath near her ear. "Practice breathing when you are being led," he murmured. Myra's pulse spiked. She wanted to yank away. She wanted to melt. Both desires frightened her because they did not belong to her, not fully. They belonged to the contract, to the training, to the ancient hunger to survive by pleasing a predator. Cameras flashed, not from guests, from the ceiling corners. The recording would go into the Order's closed network where everything became leverage. Myra understood then. This dance was staged. She was being displayed as bait, and Lucian wanted her to know it. In the morning, a medical check confirmed what her body had already tried to warn her about. The doctor, a tired woman with two bright eyes, wrapped a cuff around Myra's arm and watched the readout like it might bite. "Your pulse spikes when magic is near," the doctor said, more than before. Myra kept her tone light. "I am excited about high society." The doctor did not smile. "Your body is reacting like it is expecting a mark." The words sank into Myra's bones. She forced a laugh that sounded wrong even to her. The doctor looked away like she had said too much. Traveling to Ashford Hall felt like stepping into a mouth. The countryside was damp and gray. The car windows showed fields that looked peaceful until you noticed the crows. Too many, watching too closely. Veronica Pike sat across from Myra in the back seat and rehearsed her breakup scene as if it were a theater script. She practiced sobbing. She practiced anger. She practiced saying Rowan's name with wounded affection, but her fingers trembled in her lap when she thought no one was looking. Myra watched the tremor and felt suspicion sharpen. The client was not telling everything. Clients never did, but this felt more personal. Like Veronica was afraid of being caught in a lie that would not just embarrass her, but destroy her. Ashford Hall rose behind iron gates, stone and ivy and old power. The air around it felt different, like the property itself had been taught obedience. Myra stepped out of the car and felt the ward line brush her skin, tasting her. The illusion lenses held, but something in the house seemed to pause, as if it recognized the shape of her bones. Lady Selene Ashford greeted them in the entry hall with a smile too sweet to trust. She took Veronica's hands and spoke warmly. Then her gaze landed on Myra. For a moment, the smile did not reach Selene's eyes. For a moment, she looked at Myra as if she knew her. Myra's mouth went dry. "Welcome," Lady Selene said to her, and the words were polite. The look was not. Rowan Ashford appeared without announcement, as if doors opened for him before he touched them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that looked ceremonial rather than fashionable. His face was composed like carved stone. His eyes were the color of winter water, and they did not soften for anyone. He glanced at Veronica with a courtesy that was almost insulting in its emptiness. Then his gaze moved to Myra and held a fraction longer than polite. Not interest exactly. Assessment, the way a blade might assess a throat. Myra felt pressure in her chest, as if her name had been spoken inside her without sound. It was not attraction, she told herself. It was fear. Fear could mimic anything if it wanted to survive. Rowan stepped closer. "Who are you?" he asked. His calm made her want to step back more than shouting would have. Shouting could be resisted. Calm meant he was already sure of his power. Myra lifted her chin. "I am Talia Dune, beneficiary from a charity home, here to support Lady Veronica." Rowan tilted his head slightly. "Lies are quieter, you are loud." The words were gentle in volume and brutal in effect. Myra felt stripped without a touch. She forced a small smile, the kind society loved, the kind that said, "I accept my place." Dinner was a performance, silver and candlelight, staff moving like ghosts, Veronica talking too much, Lady Selene asking questions that sounded like kindness until you heard the hook beneath them. Rowan said little. He did not need to. With one look, he made Mara hold her posture like she was under a scope. At one point, Mara reached for her glass and her hand shook just slightly. She clenched her fingers around the stem until it steadied. Rowan noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes flicked to her hand, then back to her face, and something in her heat rose in response, resentful and unwanted. Being seen by him felt like being pinned. After dessert, Veronica took Mara's arm with sudden desperation. "Stay the night," she said, "for support, please." It broke the operation's logistics. Ethan would have wanted Mara out, clean exit, clean boundaries. But too much about this job felt staged, and Mara's instincts whispered that leaving would be the wrong kind of safe. She nodded. Of course. Later, Mara walked the corridor to the guest room assigned to her. The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Then the corridor lights died all at once, plunging her into sudden darkness. Mara stopped. Her breath caught. She heard breathing behind her, close enough to touch her hair. Something brushed her, a shadow that felt like cold fingers skimming the back of her neck. She spun. Nothing. Only the faint smell of rain and old stone. "They are testing me," she whispered to herself. Or something is. Morning came pale and sharp. Rowan requested Mara in the library not as a suggestion, as a decision already made. The library was too large, the shelves too tall, as if knowledge had been stacked to intimidate. Rowan closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a lock. "You are not here by accident," he said. Mara leaned against the idea of calm. "I go where my friend needs me." Rowan stepped closer. The air tightened. Mara became aware of the distance between their bodies with an almost obscene clarity. She could smell him, clean and cold, like snow over metal. It made her skin react, goose flesh rising along her arms beneath her sleeves. "I know you are from the shadows," Rowan said. "The question is whose?" Mara forced bite into her voice to cover fear. "And you know you have blood on your collar." Rowan's hand lifted to his collar in a smooth motion. He looked down. Clean. When he looked back at her, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, not truly. A brief, dangerous amusement. "So you are brave," he said softly, "or desperate?" Myra swallowed. Both, she thought. She did not say it. That evening, the reception took place at Blackthorn Conservatory, glass walls and glittering plants and politicians who smelled like ambition. Mara moved through it as Talia Dune, quiet, grateful, harmless. But her senses kept catching on the wrong things. A woman whose laugh was too loud. A man whose hands never left his pockets. A server who watched the exits more than the trays. She overheard a rumor in passing, carried like a disease. A verification artifact vanished from the royal vault in Eidolon City. Someone else murmured, "If they open the Abyssal Gate, it is over." Mara flinched so hard she nearly dropped her glass. The phrase lived in her nightmares, wrapped around the voice that had called her a key. Her body remembered it like a scar remembers pressure. She was supposed to plant compromise, a staged threat, a dramatic scene, but the air here tasted like something larger. Like she had been steered into a game that did not care if she survived. She slipped toward a side corridor to breathe. A drunk aristocrat followed. His face was flushed with entitlement. He pressed her back against the wall with a laugh that said he had never feared consequences in his life. "Come on," he slurred. "You are the charity girl, right? Charity can be grateful." Mara's hand moved toward the small blade hidden in her clutch. Her mind ran through options. She could make him forget. She could make him stumble into scandal. She could break his wrist and let the hall swallow the noise. The corridor door opened. Rowan appeared like a verdict. He took the man's collar with one hand and pulled him off Mara without effort. The aristocrat protested, then stopped when Rowan's gaze landed on him. Rowan did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was quiet enough to be intimate. "One more time," Rowan said, "and you will vanish from the records of the living." The man's face drained. He stumbled away, suddenly sober. When they were alone, Mara exhaled shakily. "Thank you. That was not for you," Rowan replied. "That was for order." He turned to leave. Then his fingers brushed Mara's wrist for 1 second, not quite a touch, more like a check, as if he were reading her pulse. A current ran over her skin, sharp and hot, and she jerked her hand back as if burned. Rowan's brows drew together. "What is wrong with you?" Mara forced a laugh. "Nerves." For a moment his eyes changed. Not soft, exactly. Something less cruel than distance. A flicker of concern he seemed to regret the instant it appeared. "Then stay out of corridors," he said. "People hunt here." Later that night, Mara locked herself in the guest room and called Ethan through the secure channel. His face appeared on her phone, lit by blue interface light. "Your dance with Lucian Crow leaked," Ethan said without preamble. "It is circulating in places it should not. You are a target now." Mara's stomach turned, so that was the point. Lucian had not just humiliated her. He had flagged her, marked her for predators who would recognize the signal. In the morning, Lucian called her directly, bypassing Ethan, bypassing protocol. His voice slid into her ear like a hand under a door. "I can remove the threat," Lucian said. "The price is your obedience." Mara stood by the window, staring at the Ashford grounds. The mist clung to the hedges like secrets. She kept her voice steady. "You mean the price is the rest of me?" A pause. Then his tone warmed by a fraction, which was worse than ice. "You were not made for freedom, Mara." Rage rose, sharp enough to make her hands shake. "Then I will become the mistake that breaks you," she said, and hung up before her courage could collapse. Rowan summoned her later under the pretense of verifying Veronica's safety. He sat at a desk with files laid out like weapons. His posture was relaxed, but his attention was not. He asked questions that cut in precise places, searching for the truth under her cover story. "Where did you grow up? Which home? Who sponsors you? Why does Veronica trust you?" Mara answered as Talia Dune. Each lie had to be clean. Each lie had to be small enough not to echo. Her mouth formed the words while her mind held the real history like a bruise. Greyhaven home, the smell of disinfectant, the way adults smiled when they were counting children like inventory. Rowan watched her too closely. Finally, he leaned back slightly as if he had reached a conclusion he did not like. "I will not touch you," he said quietly, "unless you force me." The words should have been a threat. They landed like something else. Like a boundary drawn for both of them. Like a confession disguised as control. Mara's breath caught. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. The second desire frightened her more because it felt like a betrayal of every survival instinct she had. That night, Veronica Pike vanished. It happened without drama. One moment, she was there, laughing too loudly at dinner. The next, her bedroom was empty, her bed unslept in, her jewelry box open as if she had left in a hurry or been forced. Myra searched the room with her heart hammering. She lifted pillows, checked drawers, looked for a note. Under Veronica's pillow, she found a silver coin engraved with a single word, Verity. The coin was heavier than it should have been. When Mara pressed her thumb into the engraving, the metal warmed. A hidden micro rune flared and then settled into a faint glow that only she could see through the illusion lenses. Coordinates formed in her mind like a whispered instruction. St. Brigid Chapel. Myra stared at the coin until her vision blurred. Veronica had used her, not just as a saboteur, as a courier. She called Ethan again, voice low, trace St. Brigid Chapel. Ethan's fingers moved fast. The chapel is tied to a cult, he said. Old records, gate worship. People disappeared there decades ago. Mara, this is not society drama. This is abyss level. Rowan found her in the hall as if he sensed the shift in the house. He looked at the coin in her hand and his expression tightened. You will not go, he said. Myra's jaw clenched. You are not my master. Rowan moved closer in one smooth step, and the distance between them snapped tight. His eyes pinned her. Say that again, he said softly, and test how truth sounds. The air between them thickened, heavy with things neither of them wanted to name. Myra felt her own vulnerability rise like heat in her throat. She hated that he could do that to her without touching her. I am vulnerable around you, she whispered, and you know it. Rowan's jaw flexed. For a moment, he looked older, tired in a way power could not hide. That is why I stay cold, he said nearly inaudibly. They went anyway. At night, in rain that turned the roads slick and the world into reflections. No escort, no official notice, because if Veronica had been taken by someone inside the network, then anyone could be a leak. Rowan drove with controlled speed, one hand on the wheel like he was holding back an impulse to go faster and break the rules. Myra sat beside him, clutching the coin, feeling the pull of something beneath her skin. St. Brigid Chapel was a dark silhouette against a stormy sky. The door yielded with a groan that sounded like warning. Inside, the air smelled sweet with old magic, like flowers left too long in a closed room. Their footsteps echoed. Myra felt watched by statues whose faces had been chipped away. Rowan moved ahead slightly, protective and dangerous at once. She hated that the sight of his broad shoulders in the dim made her feel safer. She hated that safety with him came wrapped in fear. They found the basement entrance behind the altar. Stairs descended into wet darkness. Mara's heart beat faster with each step. The dream voice returned in her head, you are a key, like the building itself remembered. In the basement, an altar waited. Stone carved with hollows shaped like keys, 3 of them arranged like a mouth waiting to bite. Key of verity, key of blood, key of dominion. Myra read the words without speaking because saying them felt like agreeing. The air thickened around her, sweet and dizzying. She stepped closer and the world seemed to tilt toward the altar like gravity favored it. Her finger brushed a sharp edge of stone and sliced. A thin bead of blood rose. Myra hissed, pulling back, but it was too late. The altar flared. Light surged up the carved lines, not white but deep and bruised, like moonlight filtered through blood. The glow responded to her with intimate immediacy, as if it had been waiting for her skin specifically. Rowan's hand closed around her wrist. No more, he said, and there was anger in it, not at her, but at the fact that she could be hurt. His palm was hot. His grip was restrained strength, terrifying because it was careful. He could break her. He chose not to. That choice made her chest ache. On the wall behind the altar, letters appeared like wet ink rising from stone. God blood opens what kings fear. Myra went cold from the inside out. She had thought her nightmares were trauma, memories twisting into monsters. But this was a message, a warning, or an instruction. Rowan stared at the words. His face did not change much, but something in his eyes darkened. We leave, he said. They moved fast up the stairs, back through the chapel. Rain struck the roof like thrown gravel. Myra's cut finger throbbed, and beneath it, something else pulsed. A faint tug deep in her skin, as if the altar had placed a thread inside her and pulled gently to test the knot. Outside, headlights cut through the storm. As they reached the car, figures stepped out of the darkness, dressed in the plain coats of bureaucrats. Crown Vale Bureau, an officer announced, holding up identification with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We have an arrest warrant for Mara Vale, carrier of forbidden blood." Myra's stomach dropped. They knew her real name. That meant the cover was dead. That meant someone had always known. Rowan stepped between her and the officer with quiet authority. "She is under my protection," he said. The officer's smile widened. "Then you are both part of the case." The alley beside the chapel tightened into a trap. Sigils flared on the officer's cuffs, blue lines cutting the air. Muffled shots cracked, not bullets, something else. Shadows moved wrong, like fabric lifting in wind that did not exist. Rowan raised a hand, and the space in front of them thickened. Mara felt the pressure of his power like the deep rumble of a storm held back. He was restraining something, a beast locked behind ice. An officer lunged toward Mara with a binding cuff, rune-lit and hungry. Mara reacted without thinking. Something in her snapped into place, a familiar, rare talent she had hidden for years because it drew the wrong kind of attention. Pattern rupture. She saw the sigil structure for a split second, the geometry of the spell, and she tore it like paper. The cuff rune shattered into sparks. The officer stumbled back with a curse. The bureau agents hesitated, recalculating. Rowan's gaze turned lethal. They retreated, but one leaned close as he backed away, close enough that Mara smelled his breath, close enough to see the contempt in his eyes. "Lord Garrick Morholt is waiting for you," the man hissed. The name hit her like a fist. Greyhaven home. "A man who sometimes came to check the children," they said, in a voice that tried to sound kind. A man with gloves and a smile and eyes that did not belong in a place filled with small beds. A man who had looked at Mara once and then spoken to the director in the hallway while Mara listened from behind a door. Mara whispered, "It is him." Rowan turned to her, and for the first time his mask cracked, not with softness, but with something like recognition of pain. He stepped close and lifted his hand to her cheek. The touch was brief, careful, as if he was afraid his fingers might bruise her. "Look at me," Rowan said. "Breathe." Myra's eyes stung. The tenderness made her want to cry more than the threat did. She forced air into her lungs. She held his gaze. His eyes were cold, yes, but the cold was deliberate. Armor, not emptiness. They returned to Ashford Hall before dawn. The house looked the same from the outside, stately and silent, but Mara could feel the change now. The walls felt like they had always been listening. Lady Selene met them in a sitting room, already awake, as if sleep had never been an option. "I knew you would come," Selene said to Mara, and her voice carried sorrow that sounded rehearsed. "Your blood is part of an ancient bargain." Myra felt like an object being discussed over her head, like property inherited. Rowan's voice cut through. "Mother, enough." Selene flinched, but she did not back down. "The crown has its mechanisms," she said. "Some are artifacts, some are people. We did not choose this, but we are bound to it." Myra wanted to scream. Bound, contract, cage, different words, same throat. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed with the coin in her palm and the cut on her finger wrapped in gauze. Her illusion lenses itched. Her skin felt too tight, like the body she lived in was trying to become someone else. She heard footsteps outside her door. Slow, unhurried, certain. She stood, heart hammering, and reached for the small blade she kept beneath her pillow. The door opened without a key. Lucian Crow stepped into the room as if he owned the space between Mara's breaths. He did not look wet from the rain. He never looked inconvenienced by reality. Darkness clung to him like a coat. Mara's voice came out rough. "How did you get in?" Lucian's gaze moved over her like a hand. "You were never safe here," he said. "You were simply not informed you were exposed." Mara's stomach turned. "Where is Nina Hart?" The name tasted like her only real home. Nina, who had taken her in when Mara ran bleeding from an order job years ago. Nina, who had been gentle when Mara could not be. Nina, with a child who called Mara aunt with a lisp that made her chest ache. Lucian's expression did not change, but his voice softened, which made it worse. "You will come with me," he said, "or I will take Nina Hart and her child." Mara felt something tear inside her. Fear became a physical thing, hot and sharp behind her ribs. She tried to breathe and could not. "Where is she?" Mara whispered. Lucian stepped closer. His presence pressed against her skin, making her body react in ways she hated. Her pulse spiked. Her palms went damp. Not desire, she told herself, not desire. Conditioned response. Survival, but her body did not care what she called it. "Submit," Lucian said, and she wakes up alive. Mara's eyes burned. "Do not do this," she whispered, but she knew he would. That was what he was, control wearing a human face. Lucian lifted his hand. One finger traced the side of her throat, so lightly it might have been imagination. The touch made Mara shiver, disgust and heat tangled together. His finger paused at the spot where her nightmare had burned. "You are a key," he murmured, almost fond. "And keys do not get to choose the lock." Pain flared. Not a cut, not a bruise, but a symbol pressed into her skin with invisible fire. Mara gasped and grabbed his wrist, but it was like grabbing smoke. The mark burned in a thin line that felt both external and deep, like it had sunk into her blood. Lucian leaned in as if to kiss her cheek, but he stopped just short. "I will send coordinates," he said. "Do not make me prove how serious I am about leverage." He turned and walked to the door. Before he left, he glanced back at her with eyes that reflected nothing. "When the mark calls, you will follow," he said. "That is what it means to belong." He closed the door behind him. Myra stood shaking, fingers pressed to the burning symbol on her throat. It did not wipe away. It did not fade. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, tugging her attention toward somewhere she could not yet name. She heard heavy footsteps, faster now, and the door opened hard enough to strike the wall. Rowan Ashford filled the doorway, his face composed but his eyes dark with something that felt like weather. His gaze locked on Myra's throat, on the mark, and the air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. His rage became physical. The candle flame on the dresser bent sideways as if a wind had entered. Shadows deepened in the corners as if they were listening. "He was here," Rowan said. It was not a question. Myra could not speak. She nodded once, and the motion made the mark flare brighter, a lash of heat that stole her breath. Rowan took one step closer, then stopped. He did not touch her. He held himself back like a man holding a chained animal by sheer will. "Lucian Crow," Rowan said, and the name sounded like a sentence. Myra pressed her hand to her throat. "It burns." Rowan's jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to tear the world apart and hated that he could not do it without tearing her too. He lifted his cloak from his shoulders and draped it around her carefully, like he was afraid to break her with fabric. "I do not know how to be gentle," Rowan said roughly, "but I know how to protect." Myra's voice came out small, honest in a way she rarely allowed. "I am afraid near you." Rowan's gaze held hers. "That is honest," he said. Then, quieter, "I am still dangerous." The mark pulsed again and Mara's knees went weak. She gripped the cloak at her chest, inhaling the cold, clean scent of him. It anchored her and terrified her because it worked. She swallowed hard. "He took Nina. He is using her to pull me." Rowan's eyes flashed. "Bait." Mara forced herself to stand straight. "That is my family," she said. "I cannot let him hurt them because I refuse to walk into a trap." Rowan stared at her throat, then at her eyes, as if he were measuring how much fear she could carry before she broke. His voice dropped lower. "Then you will not go alone," he said. "If you go in front of me." It sounded like an order. It also sounded like a confession of possession he did not want to admit. Mara's body reacted again, that traitorous twist in her stomach, the awareness of being claimed and protected at the same time. The mark flared, a hotter pulse, and for a moment Mara felt the direction of it like a leash tugging. Somewhere by the water, somewhere cold, somewhere waiting. She looked at Rowan and saw something rare behind the ice, not warmth exactly, restraint. A man who could crush the world, choosing not to crush her. Mara whispered, "If I ask you to stop, will you?" Rowan answered immediately, as if the rule mattered more than anything. "Yes." The simplicity of it hit her harder than promises. It made her throat ache, right beside Lucian's burning symbol. It made her want to lean forward, to press her forehead to Rowan's chest just to feel something solid. Instead, she stood trembling, listening to the mark pulse like a clock counting down, and knowing that whatever waited at the end of that leash was already opening its mouth. Dawn in Ashford Hall arrived like a verdict, pale and thin and unwilling to warm anything it touched. Myra sat upright in the guest bed with Rowan's cloak wrapped around her shoulders. The fabric held his scent, clean and cold, and it anchored her in a way that made her angry because she needed it. The mark on her throat pulsed under her fingertips. It did not feel like skin anymore. It felt like a seal pressed into her life. Rowan was in the chair by the window, motionless, as if sleep were a privilege he did not allow himself. His posture looked relaxed, but she could feel the tension in him like a wire stretched too tight. Every so often his gaze shifted to her throat and then away, as if looking too long might make it worse. Ethan Cade's call came through the secure channel on Mara's phone, silent vibration only. Mara answered at once. Ethan's face appeared, lit by interface blue, eyes bloodshot from a night without rest. "It is confirmed. Veronica Pike did not hire you to ruin an engagement. She was placed to deliver you. Moorholt paid her. The payment trail runs through a front charity, then into Greyhaven's old account structures." Mara's hand tightened on the phone. "Moorholt is real, not a nightmare." "He is real," Ethan said, "and he is not alone. Greyhaven was one site. There were others. Patterned adoptions, blood tests hidden in medical charity drives. I found references to something called the Dominion Registry, a private list." Myra swallowed. The mark flared, and for a second she tasted copper like fear had a flavor. "They cataloged children." "They cataloged keys," Ethan said. "Mara, listen to me. There is a second thing. Crown Vale Bureau is not acting like a single agency. There are two internal currents. One wants you contained. One wants you dead before you can be used. I cannot tell who is who." Rowan's voice cut in, low and controlled. "Coordinates." Ethan looked at Rowan, then back at Mara. "Cinder Key, abandoned waterfront dock. Lucian's people secured the perimeter an hour ago. There is signal jamming on the east approach. Mara, it is a trap built by someone who understands you. Mara's eyes burned. He took Nina. He took her child. I know, Ethan said, and the steadiness in his tone cracked just enough to hurt. I have a location ping from Nina's old phone, but it is moving in short bursts. They want you to follow. They want your feet on their circle. Mara's throat tightened around the words. Can you get help there without warning them? I can try, Ethan said, but if I flood the channel, whoever is inside Crown Vale will arrive before us and take you, not Lucian. I concede a silent tip to one honest contact I have. No guarantees. Rowan's jaw flexed. Do it. Ethan nodded. One more thing. The altar at St. Brigid, the 3 hollows. The key of verity is artifact grade. The key of blood is likely artifact grade 2. The 3rd key can be living, you already said it. Mara's fingers brushed the burning symbol at her throat. She did not want to say it again, like speaking it would lock it into reality, but her silence did not change her blood. The 3rd key is me, she whispered. Rowan's gaze snapped to her face. Something raw moved behind his eyes, fast and dangerous. No. Mara almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because denial sounded like a prayer from a man who did not pray. You cannot order reality to stop. Rowan stood. His height made the room feel smaller. You are not a tool. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made her chest ache, because she wanted to believe him, and she had been trained not to believe men with power. She held his gaze anyway, and felt her body react, the strange, traitorous awareness that came when he focused on her. Vulnerability did not erase desire. It braided around it until she could not tell where one ended and the other began. I do not want to be a tool, Myra said. I also cannot leave Nina to die to prove a point about autonomy. Rowan's voice dropped lower. Lucian counts on that. Then we make it fail, Myra said. A knock came at the door, not a polite tap. A coded pattern, fast and exact. Rowan opened it a hand's width, then wider when he saw who stood there. Lady Selene Ashford, dressed in traveling black, eyes bright with sleeplessness. I heard, Selene said. She looked at Myra's throat. Her face tightened as if she had been slapped by something invisible. He marked you. Myra's pulse spiked again, hot and humiliating. Yes. Selene stepped in, closing the door softly behind her. Rowan, we do not have time to pretend this is a private family matter. If they open the gate at the water, it will pull the city's ward lines like threads. It will not stop at the key. Rowan's expression did not change. I know. Selene's gaze went to Myra. You were born into a mechanism. I hate that it is true. I hate that it sounds like an excuse when it is a confession, but you need to understand the rule. Artifact keys open doors. Living keys keep them open. Myra's stomach turned. So my blood is the hinge. Selene hesitated, then nodded. Yes, and if you are bound by another's mark, your will can be overridden at the moment it matters. Rowan's hand curled, then relaxed. The motion looked small, but Myra felt the violence behind it. Tell me how to sever it. Selene's gaze flicked to her son. If it were a simple cut, the crown would have ended this centuries ago. Mark magic sits in identity. It is not on her skin, it is in her. If it is forced out, it tears what it clings to. Myra's breath came short. So I am stuck. Selene shook her head. Not stuck, but the solution has a cost. Rowan's voice turned colder. Say it. Selene's throat moved as she swallowed. A counter seal. A dominant binding to take ownership of the channel and lock it closed. It has to come from an opposing bloodline. That is why the Ashfords exist in the first place. To shut what others open. Myra looked at Rowan. The air between them felt charged, intimate in the worst possible way. She saw it in his eyes before he said it. He had known this would come. He had just not wanted to tell her. Rowan's voice was steady. If I take the channel, I become the anchor. The mark transfers to me. And if the gate is opening, Mara said, voice thin, the anchor gets dragged with it. Rowan did not answer immediately. In that silence, Mara heard the truth. Maybe, he said at last, her heart hammered hard enough to hurt. She hated him for being willing. She hated herself for wanting to let him. No, Rowan's gaze held hers, unblinking. We will decide at the key. Mara stepped closer without meaning to. The pull was not only the mark, it was him. It was the way he stood between her and the world like a wall that could also become a cage. Her breath caught as she realized how badly she wanted to lean into that wall, to let it hold her up. That desire frightened her more than Lucian's threat because it felt like her own. I need a rule, she said. Rowan's brow lowered slightly. Speak. If you touch me, Myra said, forcing the words through a throat that wanted to close, you ask, even in crisis. Even if you think it is obvious, I need to know my body is not another contract. Rowan's expression did not soften, but something in his gaze sharpened with attention, like he had just been handed a weapon he respected. Understood. Myra's lips parted. Say it. Rowan's voice was quiet. I will ask. The simple sentence hit her hard. Consent as a promise, not as a luxury. Her eyes stung. She looked away quickly, furious at herself for almost crying over something that should have been normal. Selene watched them, face unreadable. Rowan, there is another piece. Morholt is not only after Mara, he wants you too. Dominion means control. If he can bind you through her, he can bend the crown's seal into his own. Rowan's jaw tightened. He will fail. Selene's voice dropped. He may not if you underestimate Lucian Crow. Mara's hand went to her throat again. The mark pulsed in answer, as if it enjoyed being spoken about like a living thing. Rowan moved toward the door. We leave now. Ethan called again before they reached the stairs. Mara answered as she walked, the motion making her slightly dizzy. I sent a silent tip, Ethan said. One person, Agent Holly's. If she is clean, she will show. If she is not, you will have a new enemy at the key. Mara's stomach tightened. Thank you. Ethan's gaze softened for a moment. Mara, about Nina, I am sorry. Mara held the phone closer as if she could pull steadiness out of his voice. Do not apologize. Help me bring them back. That is how you love me. Ethan nodded once, sharp like a vow. Then do not die. Rowan took the phone from her and ended the call. He handed it back immediately, not controlling it, just removing the distraction. Stay close, he said. Mara's mouth twisted. That sounds like an order. It is, Rowan said, then quieter, and it is also the only way I can keep you alive. They left Ashford Hall in Rowan's car, black and unmarked. The road to Cinder Key cut through industrial outskirts and then into fog that smelled of salt and metal. Myra watched the landscape slide by and tried not to think of Nina's hands, warm and capable, making soup in a small kitchen, laughing when Myra burned the bread again. Nina, who had never asked what Myra had done to deserve her scars. Nina, who had simply seen Myra and decided she was worth softness. The mark on Myra's throat tugged more strongly the closer they got to the water. It was not only heat now, it was direction, a steady pull like a leash, as if her blood had learned a command. Rowan's hands were steady on the steering wheel. His calm should have soothed her. Instead, it made her want to reach across the console and touch him, to confirm he was real, to confirm she was not alone inside her own skin. She did not. She kept her hands in her lap until her fingernails bit her palm. "You are shaking," Rowan said. "I am not," Mara lied automatically. Rowan's voice did not rise. "Mara, look at me." The words were a trigger. She hated that they worked. Her gaze snapped to his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the stillness of his mouth, the eyes that stayed on the road but somehow held her anyway. Rowan spoke like he was stating a fact he did not enjoy. "Lucian wants you afraid. Fear makes you easy to steer." Mara's voice came out rough. "I am afraid." Rowan's tone remained cold. "Then do it anyway, with fear, not without it." She swallowed. "Why do you talk like that?" Rowan's grip tightened slightly. "Because comfort can be stolen. Discipline is harder to take from you." The answer slid under her ribs and stayed there. It was not kindness, it was something else. Respect, maybe, in the only shape he knew how to offer it. They parked 2 blocks from the quay. The closer approach was on foot through stacked containers and rusted fencing. Fog curled low, swallowing sound. The water's presence was everywhere, even when she could not see it, a cold pressure in the air. Rowan stopped behind a container wall and glanced at Mara. "I am going to place my hand on your back to guide you. Do I have consent?" The question hit her with a strange mix of relief and shame. Relief that he asked. Shame that she wanted it so badly it hurt. "Yes," Mara whispered. Rowan's gloved hand pressed lightly between her shoulder blades. Not force. Guidance. Heat bled through the leather and her breath stumbled. She hated her body for reacting when the situation was terror. She hated herself for feeling alive. They moved together, Rowan slightly behind and to the side, a shield that did not block her view. Mara peered around the edge of the container and saw Cinder Key below, the dock stretching like a broken finger into dark water. Floodlights had been erected on portable stands, their white glare cutting through fog in hard cones. Cables ran along the ground like veins. At the center of the quay, a portable ritual circle had been painted on metal plating bolted to the dock. It glowed faintly, as if the paint contained crushed glass and old words. 2 objects sat in carved cradles on opposite sides of the circle, each radiating a low vibration Mara felt in her teeth. Keys, artifact keys. And at the far edge of the dock, chains hung from a crane arm extended out over the water. 2 small shapes were suspended above the black surface. Mara's vision narrowed so violently she almost swayed. Nina's hair, damp and tangled, her face pale under the floodlight. A small child against her, trembling, head tucked into Nina's shoulder. The chains were secured around their torsos, cruelly practical. 1 mechanical release lever on the crane housing. 1 pull, and they would drop. Mara's lungs refused to work for a second. The mark on her throat surged, and her body tried to step forward on its own. Rowan's hand tightened on her back, not restraining, just reminding. He leaned close enough that his breath brushed her hair. "Do not move yet," Mara's voice broke. "That is Nina." "I see," Rowan said. A shape moved inside the ritual circle. Lucian Crow stepped into the light like he belonged there more than the dock did. He wore black as always, but tonight it looked ceremonial, the fabric absorbing glare. His face was calm, almost bored, and his eyes fixed on Mara immediately, as if the fog were nothing and she were a beacon. He smiled. "Mara Vale," Lucian called, voice carrying across water. "Come closer. I want you to see how alive they still are." Mara's legs went rigid. Rowan's body shifted, preparing. Another man stepped into view near the crane housing, older, broad-shouldered, dressed not in ritual robes, but in an expensive coat that did not belong on a dock. His hair was silver at the temples. His gloves were pale leather, Garrick Morholt. Myra recognized him with her whole body, not just her memory, the way his gaze moved, the way he looked at people like inventory he had paid for. Morholt's smile was gentle in the way poison can be sweet. "You grew beautifully," he said. "Greyhaven did not ruin you after all." Myra's stomach twisted. "You funded that place." Morholt spread his hands as if acknowledging a compliment. "A philanthropist has to invest somewhere. You cannot harvest a rare thing without a field." Myra's voice shook. "Children are not a field." Morholt's eyes did not change. "They are if you want the world to keep turning. We required living keys. We found them. We raised them. We protected them from ordinary lives that would have wasted them." Protected. The word made Mara want to vomit. Lucian took one slow step toward the edge of the circle. "Do you feel it, Mara? The pull." "That is my mark telling your blood where it belongs." Myra's hand rose to her throat. The symbol burned under her fingers, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the circle's glow. She felt like a compass being forced to point north. Rowan stepped into view beside her. The air changed immediately, not because Rowan did anything overt, but because his presence made the dock feel smaller, as if the world had to rearrange itself to accommodate him. Lucian's smile widened. "Rowan Ashford, the crown's lovely knife. Did you come to watch her choose?" Rowan's voice carried with quiet violence. "Step away from her," Morholt chuckled. "So the rumor is true. The Inquisitor is attached. How fortunate. Dominion always works better with leverage." Myra glanced at Rowan and saw his face go even colder, a mask sliding into place. But his gaze flicked to Nina, then back to Myra's throat, and she saw it, the fury that had to be contained to keep them alive. Lucian tilted his head. "Mara, walk to the circle." "If you do not, I will drop the chain." Nina lifted her head. Even from a distance, Mara saw her mouth move, saw her shaking attempt at a shout. "Do not," Nina mouthed. "Do not come." Myra's eyes blurred. She took one step forward before she realized she was moving. Rowan's hand caught her wrist. His grip was firm, not painful. He spoke into her ear. "The mark is compelling you. Fight it." Myra swallowed. "I am trying." "Look at Nina," Rowan said. "Do not look at Lucian. Do not give him your mind." Myra forced her gaze to Nina again. Nina's eyes met hers. There was fear there, but there was also something stronger. Trust. The kind that made Myra's chest ache. Myra exhaled, shaking. "Nina, I am here." Morholt raised a small device like a remote. His gloved thumb rested on a switch. "One more step and she lives a little longer. One refusal and we test how deep the water is." Lucian's voice softened, intimate as a whisper across a room. "Come to me, Myra. Let the mark do its job. You were made for belonging." Myra's skin prickled with revulsion, and beneath it, shameful heat, the body's conditioned response to power and threat braided together. She hated that Lucian could summon any reaction at all. She hated that fear could feel like desire when the wrong man held the leash. Rowan's voice was steadier than stone. "Mara, listen to me. Your body can react and your mind can still refuse. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears spilling now. "Yes." Rowan's gaze held hers for a fraction of a second. "Good, now we move. I will cover you. You will not step into the circle." "How do I save them?" Myra whispered. Rowan's eyes flicked to the crane. "We take the lever." Lucian watched them like a predator watches a calculation. "You can try," he called, "but the circle is already awake. The keys are aligned. All we need is her, or the blood inside her. Either way, she will open it." The two artifact keys began to glow brighter. One was the silver coin Myra had found, the key of verity. Its surface shimmered with a cold, truth-seeking light. The other was darker, a small object shaped like a thorned ring, the key of blood. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Myra felt the circle call to her mark. The sensation was almost dizzying, like leaning over a height and feeling the urge to jump. Rowan moved first, fast and controlled. He stepped out from cover and walked toward the dock, posture relaxed as if he had all night. The confidence was its own weapon. Morholt lifted the remote slightly. "Inquisitor, stop!" Rowan did not stop. Lucian's voice sharpened. "Drop the chain." Morholt's thumb hovered. Myra surged forward, panic overriding caution. "No!" Rowan caught her with a look, not a touch, a command without cruelty. "Stay," but her body did not obey him. It obeyed Nina. Myra forced herself into motion at Rowan's side, keeping low, using the container shadows. She felt Rowan's attention snap to her, but he did not waste breath scolding her. His focus turned predatory, calculating routes and angles. They reached the dock's edge. The wood and metal underfoot creaked and shuddered with tide movement. The floodlights made everything harsh and bright, stripping away hiding places. Lucian smiled directly at Myra, savoring her exposure. "That is it. Come closer. Feel how your blood recognizes its purpose." Myra's mark flared. Heat licked down her throat into her chest, making her breath hitch. She pressed her fingers against the symbol hard enough to hurt. "I am not yours." Lucian's eyes darkened with satisfaction. "Say it again. I love it when you lie to yourself." Rowan's voice cut across the dock. "Morholt, release them, now." Morholt's gaze moved over Rowan like a buyer appraising an expensive object. "I would rather watch you beg, but I will be practical. Give me the living key, and I will let the woman and the child go." Myra's stomach clenched. The offer was designed to sound reasonable. It was not. Rowan's face remained composed. "No," Lucian's smile turned sharp. "Then you choose their death." Myra's heart slammed. She took another step and the circle pulsed, welcoming. Rowan's hand caught her forearm. He spoke low, close. "If you step into that circle, you may not be able to step out. Do you understand?" Myra's voice was shaking, but she met his eyes. "If I do nothing, they die. Do you understand?" Rowan's jaw tightened. He looked toward Nina, then at the crane lever. His expression did not show panic, but his eyes held something like strain, as if a part of him was already cracking its cage. He spoke once, decisive. "Ethan said Crown Vale might show. We cannot wait. We take them ourselves." "How?" Myra whispered. Rowan's gaze slid to Lucian, then to Morholt's remote. "We break the leverage." The dock shuddered. A low vibration ran through the metal plates under the ritual circle. The two keys brightened. The air above the circle rippled. Myra felt it before she saw it. The pressure shift, the wrongness, like a seam in the world being pulled open. She looked up and saw darkness form above the water beyond the dock, not just absence of light, but a tear, a mouth-shaped rip in reality that made the floodlights bend. The Abyssal Gate. It opened silently at first. Then the sound came, not a roar, but a deep sucking pull, like the world inhaling through a wound. Morholt's smile turned reverent. "There it is, beautiful." Lucian's voice softened again, almost tender. "This is what you were raised for, Myra, to make the impossible obedient." The pull from Myra's mark intensified. Her feet shifted toward the circle without her choosing. She clenched her jaw until her teeth hurt. Rowan stepped closer to her, blocking her line to the circle. "Myra, look at me." She did. His eyes were cold, but there was something beneath, something fierce that did not belong to cruelty. Protection. Possession in its purest form, terrifying and comforting at once. Rowan spoke with brutal clarity. If you step in, the gate will recognize you and lock. If it locks, it will not close without a seal. That seal kills the anchor. Myra's breath caught. Tell me how to close it. Rowan did not flinch from the truth. You burn the key from inside, you become the seal, or I do. Lucian laughed, delighted. Romantic. Choose, Myra. The dock groaned as the pull intensified. Loose debris scraped toward the water. A metal barrel rolled, then lifted slightly as if gravity had shifted. Nina and the child swung on the chains, the motion made worse by the unnatural current. Nina wrapped herself tighter around the child, trying to shield him with her own body. Myra's eyes filled again. Nina! Nina shouted something then, and the wind stole most of it, but Myra caught a word. Live. Myra's hands shook. Her mind raced through every survival training the Order had burned into her. Use leverage, use weakness, use yourself. Then she remembered something else. Not training, choice. Myra turned toward Rowan. If we reverse the channel, can we make Lucian's mark feed into you without stepping into the circle? Rowan's gaze narrowed. Maybe. Then do not let me be forced, Myra said. Let me do it. Rowan's expression tightened. What are you asking? Myra's throat burned as she spoke. I want to rupture the mark, not remove it, shatter its pattern so it cannot command me. But if I do it alone, the gate might surge wider. I need you ready to counter-seal instantly. Rowan's jaw clenched. It will hurt you. Myra almost smiled through panic. Everything hurts. Lucian called, impatient now. Enough whispering, walk, Myra, or they fall. Morholt lifted the remote and angled it toward the crane mechanism. His thumb hovered again, a small, simple motion that could end 2 lives. Myra looked at Rowan. Her voice came out thin. If I tell you to stop, you stop. Rowan's answer was immediate, rough. Yes, Myra exhaled. Then do not stop me. Before Rowan could respond, Myra stepped forward, not into the circle, but toward its edge. The pull tried to drag her into the center. She fought it with a kind of fury that made her bones feel sharp. Lucian watched her with hungry satisfaction. Good girl. Myra's stomach turned, rage flaring hot. She lifted her hand and pressed her palm against the burning symbol on her throat. Pain exploded, bright and intimate, as if she had grabbed a live wire inside her own body. For a split second, she could see it, not with eyes, but with the part of her that did pattern rupture. The mark was not a single sigil. It was a layered command structure woven into her identity, threaded through fear responses, pleasure responses, obedience conditioning. Lucian had built it like a cage that could masquerade as desire. Myra drove her rupture into it. The world went white at the edges. Her knees buckled. She tasted blood. The air screamed without sound. The mark fractured, not cleanly. It shattered like glass, and the shards did not disappear. They flew outward, searching for something to attach to. The gate reacted immediately. The rip above the water widened, hungry, as if sensing instability and rushing to exploit it. Wind tore across the dock. Floodlights flickered. The ritual circle flared violently, lines blazing. Lucian's eyes widened for the first time, not fear, excitement. Yes, he breathed. Break and open, that is what you are. Myra gasped, barely able to stand. Her fingers slid from her throat, slick with a thin line of blood from where she had bitten her own lip. The leash sensation weakened, but the gate's pull intensified, turning the dock into a funnel. Rowan moved like a strike. He stepped behind Myra and wrapped one arm around her torso, holding her upright without crushing her. He spoke close to her ear. I have you. Do you consent to me holding you? Mara's eyes blurred. She forced the word out. Yes. Rowan's hold tightened slightly, stabilizing her. The heat of him at her back sent a sharp, unwanted pulse through her body, a flash of intimacy in the middle of horror. She clung to the sensation anyway because it reminded her she was still human. Rowan raised his free hand toward the circle. The air around him changed, heavier, as if pressure dropped before a storm. Mara felt something in him shift, something older than training. Lucian saw it and smiled like a man watching a rival finally reveal teeth. Oh, the dragon wakes. Rowan's voice was ice. Do not speak. He stepped forward, dragging Mara with him a half step, positioning her out of the circle's direct line but close enough for him to reach the pattern. His hand sliced through the air, tracing a counter seal that looked nothing like the circle's lines. This was not painted. It was imposed. It made the air shimmer, and the floodlight glare bent around it. Morholt's reverent expression twisted. Ashford, do not, he said, suddenly less calm. If you seal it that way, you will bind yourself. Rowan did not look at him. That is the point. Mara's breath caught. Rowan? Rowan glanced at her for a fraction, and in that moment his mask slipped. There was a plea there, brief and raw, not for his life, for her to survive what he was about to do. He spoke quietly, so only she could hear. I am going to transfer what remains of Lucian's channel into me and lock it. It will hurt. You may feel it like a tearing. If you need me to stop, say it. Mara's throat tightened. If she said stop, he might live. Nina might die. The gate might open wider. The world might end. And Mara would remain a key available for the next hand that reached for her. She shook her head, tears falling. Do it. Rowan's jaw flexed. Say the word so I know it is choice. Mara forced breath into her lungs. Yes. Rowan nodded once, sharp like a promise. He turned back to the circle and pressed his palm to the air above its glowing lines, not touching the paint, touching the structure behind it. The air cracked like frost under pressure. The fractured shards of Lucian's mark leapt as if called. They whipped toward Rowan's hand, then crawled up his arm like living ink. Rowan did not flinch. His expression remained controlled, but Mara saw his neck muscles strain, saw the effort it took not to react. Lucian's smile faltered. No, he said softly, the first real emotion in his voice. You cannot take what is mine. Rowan's voice was a low growl. Watch me. The dock shuddered. The gate above the water expanded, then hesitated as if sensing a counterforce. The pull became chaotic, tugging in irregular bursts. Metal screeched. The crane arm groaned. Morholt shouted an order, and several men at the edges of the dock moved, raising sigil cuffs and throwing bindings. Lines of light snapped toward Rowan. Rowan lifted his hand, and the bindings broke apart as if the air rejected them. The counter seal around him flared, a faint red shimmer like heat under skin. Mara saw it then. For a heartbeat, something not fully human pressed against Rowan's outline, like shadow scales and a suggestion of horns made of darkness and light. Not a transformation, not fully. A restrained truth. Mara's stomach flipped. Fear and awe and something else, something dangerous, coiled in her chest. She wanted to run from it. She wanted to press her mouth to the line of his jaw and feel him reel under her lips. The desire was absurd and humiliating and undeniable. Rowan's hand tightened into a fist. The mark that had been on Mara's throat now burned in a faint echo on Rowan's skin, visible as a thin line of light crawling along his wrist and up toward his throat, trying to claim him. Rowan drove his counter seal into it like a nail. The air boomed without sound. Myra's ears rang. The gate jerked as if something had hooked it by the edge. Lucian's eyes widened. He stepped back, and for the first time his composure cracked. "You are binding me to your seal," he hissed. Rowan's voice was like winter steel. "You wanted ownership. Now you have consequence." Morholt snarled, suddenly ugly. "Drop the chain," he shouted, and slammed his thumb down on the remote. The crane mechanism clicked. Myra's heart stopped. Nina and the child dropped, not fully released, but the chain slackened enough that they fell several feet in a jolt. Nina screamed. The child cried out, a thin sound ripped away by wind. They swung hard, the arc carrying them closer to the gate's pull. Myra screamed Nina's name and surged forward. Rowan's arm snapped around her again, holding her in place. "Mara," he barked, and the harshness of her name cut through her panic. "If you run into the circle now, it wins." Mara's body shook violently. "Then let me do something." Rowan's breath came hard, controlled. "You will, not there." He jerked his chin toward the crane housing. "Go, cut the chains, I will hold the gate." Myra stared at him. "You cannot do both." Rowan's eyes flashed. "I can hold it long enough." Myra's lungs burned. The choice was sharp and immediate. She nodded once, then ran, staying along the dock's edge where the pull was less concentrated. Wind tore at her hair. The gate's suction dragged at her clothes, trying to pull her toward the water. She reached the crane housing. The lever mechanism was guarded by one of Morholt's men, a heavy figure with a sigil cuff already glowing. He lunged. Myra ducked and drove her shoulder into his midsection, hard enough to knock him off balance. Pain shot through her shoulder. She ignored it. Her hand went to the small blade in her pocket. The man grabbed for her wrist. The cuff flashed. Myra saw the sigil geometry for an instant. She ruptured it. The light shattered into sparks. The man staggered back as if slapped, eyes wide with shock. Mara did not hesitate. She slammed the lever upward, locking the crane release in place, then grabbed the chain's manual brake and cranked with shaking hands, hauling Nina and the child a fraction higher, away from the water's immediate pull. The mechanism squealed in protest. Her arms screamed. She kept turning. "Nina," Myra shouted, voice raw. "Hold on, I am coming." Nina's face was wet, rain and tears. She clung to the child with a ferocity that made Mara's chest crack open. "Mara," Nina cried, "do not come near the circle." "I am not," Mara yelled back. "I am getting you down." Mara climbed onto the support platform and reached the chain junction where the shackle held them. The lock was thick and industrial. The gate's pull surged. Mara nearly lost her balance. She pressed her forehead to the metal for a second, grounding herself, then forced her hands to work. The shackle had a release pin. It was secured by a sigil clasp, faintly glowing. Someone had enchanted the lock. Myra's fingers trembled as she traced the pattern with her eyes. She could break it, but if she ruptured too violently, it might snap the chain and drop them. She breathed once, slow, like Rowan had told her earlier. "Discipline is harder to take from you." Myra applied rupture gently, not tearing, but unweaving the sigil thread by thread. The clasp dimmed, then went dead. She pulled the pin. The shackle opened. Nina and the child dropped onto the platform with a heavy thud. Nina gasped, stumbling, then wrapped the child tighter, shielding his head. The child sobbed into her shoulder. Myra grabbed them both, hauling them away from the edge. "Move," Myra rasped. "Crawl if you have to." Nina's eyes found Myra's throat, then widened at what she saw there. The mark was fractured now, faint, but the skin around it looked angry. "What did he do to you?" Later, Myra said, voice cracking. Go. They moved together, low to the platform, using the crane housing as partial cover from the gate's pull. Myra looked back toward the ritual circle. Rowan was still there, a solitary figure against the floodlight glare and the tearing dark above the water. His coat snapped in the wind. His stance was wide, braced, like he was physically holding the world shut. The faint red shimmer around him flared again, and Mara saw those shadow scales press against his outline once more, restrained by sheer will. Lucian was near the circle's edge, not running, not fully panicking, but fighting. Dark threads flickered around his hands as he tried to sever the hook Rowan had placed on him. Morholt had retreated from the circle, barking orders into a radio that probably did not work anymore. His men were being dragged by the gate's pull, stumbling, grabbing for bolts and railings. Then Crown Vale bureau vehicles screamed into the quay, sirens muted by the wind, lights cutting through fog. Agents poured out, moving in disciplined formation. Myra's heart jolted. Ethan's contact had come. A woman in a dark coat with bureau insignia raised a megaphone, then dropped it when she saw the gate. She did not waste breath on procedure. She shouted orders, directing agents to secure the perimeter and take down Morholt's men. Agent Holly's, Myra thought, remembering Ethan's name. Morholt saw the agents and snarled. He bolted toward a vehicle, trying to escape the chaos. 2 bureau agents moved to intercept. Morholt raised a hand and flung a sigil burst, more sophisticated than his men's cuffs. One agent went down, grabbing his chest, gasping. Myra's rage snapped hot. Morholt was still dangerous, still reaching for control. Myra stepped from cover, leaving Nina and the child tucked behind the crane housing. Nina grabbed her sleeve. Mara, do not. Myra looked at Nina's face. Love made the fear sharper. I have to. She ran toward Morholt, staying low, using the dock's uneven metal plates for cover. Wind tried to drag her. She fought it. Morholt turned and saw her. His eyes lit with triumph. There you are, he breathed. Living key. He reached for her, gloved hand outstretched. Myra saw the cuff on his wrist, the sigil lines ready to clamp. Dominion, she did not let him touch her. Myra ruptured the sigil before it fully formed, tearing the pattern at its root. The light collapsed into dead sparks. Morholt's expression twisted, shocked. Myra slammed her shoulder into his chest and drove him backward toward the wet dock edge, away from any stable footing. He stumbled, arms windmilling. Stop, Morholt hissed. Do you know what you are destroying? The crown itself is built on bargains like this. Myra's voice shook, but it was clear. Then let it rebuild without children. Morholt lunged again, but his grip was clumsy now, his magic disrupted. Myra hooked her foot behind his ankle and shoved. Morholt went down hard, splashing into a shallow puddle that immediately streamed toward the gate. His expensive coat darkened. His gloves scraped against metal. Bureau agents reached him and pinned him, one knee on his back, cuffs snapping into place. Morholt thrashed, spitting curses, his calm finally gone. Agent Holly's approached, face grim. Her eyes went to Myra's throat, then to the fractured symbol. She did not point a weapon at Myra. Not yet. That alone felt like a miracle. Holly's shouted over the wind. Myra Vale, step away from the ritual site. Now, Myra's chest heaved. The gate is open. Rowan Ashford is holding it. Holly's gaze snapped to Rowan, then to Lucian. She swore under her breath. All units, do not engage Ashford. Do not engage the gate. Secure civilians and suspects. Repeat, secure civilians and suspects. Holly's looked back at Myra. Who opened it? Myra's eyes stung. Morholt and Lucian Crow. Lucian marked me to use me as a key. Holly's expression tightened. Crow is order. Yes, Myra said, and the order is not clean. Holly's jaw clenched. We will deal with that after we survive the next 60 seconds. Myra turned back toward Rowan. The gate pulsed, straining against his seal. Rowan's shoulders trembled with effort now. His control was not infinite. Lucian took a step away from the circle, trying to retreat toward the fog. He lifted his hand, shaping a shadow portal, a way out. Rowan's head snapped toward him. The hook line between them flared, visible as a faint dark thread. Lucian jerked as if pulled by a barbed leash. Rowan spoke, voice carrying across the dock like a blade. You do not leave. Lucian's expression twisted into something ugly. You will kill yourself holding me. Rowan's voice remained cold. I will live long enough to end you. Myra saw Rowan's hand tighten and Lucian's portal collapsed into smoke. Lucian's gaze flicked toward Myra, and for a second his eyes were not calm. They were furious. You chose him, he hissed, as if she had committed infidelity, as if her body had ever belonged to him. Myra's stomach turned. I chose myself. Lucian laughed, sharp and bitter. Then watch yourself die anyway. He slammed his palm onto the edge of the ritual circle, injecting power into it like poison. The circle flared brighter. The gate surged in answer, widening with a hungry snap. The dock groaned and split in one place, metal tearing. Myra's breath caught. The wind became a roar. Several of Morholt's men were dragged screaming toward the water. One slipped and disappeared into the darkness below the dock. Rowan staggered one step, then braced again, jaw clenched hard enough to show strain even through his mask. Myra ran toward him, heart hammering, unable to stay away. Rowan's head turned slightly. Stop, he barked, and the command slammed into her like a wall. Myra froze, trembling. You are breaking. Rowan's voice was rough now. I am holding. Myra looked at the circle. The two keys were blazing. The gate's mouth rippled, edges tearing wider. The air was being pulled into it, dragging fog, rain, loose debris. The world wanted to fall inward. Myra's mind snapped into pattern mode. She could see it, not the gate itself, but the structure feeding it. The circle was a conduit. The artifact keys were amplifiers. Her fractured mark was a destabilizing third component, still resonating. She could help, not by stepping into the circle, but by severing the feed. Myra shouted to Rowan, I can rupture the circle lines. If I break the conduit, it will starve. Rowan's eyes flashed, calculating risk. It might backlash. I know, Myra yelled, but you are not going to die because I was afraid to act. Rowan's voice cut sharp. Do not martyr yourself. Myra met his gaze, shaking. Then do not martyr yourself either. For a fraction of a second, something eased in Rowan's eyes, not softness, agreement. Rowan spoke, clear and controlled despite strain. I will hold the gate steady for 3 breaths. You rupture the circle. Do not touch the keys. Do you understand? Myra nodded hard. Yes. Rowan's voice dropped. If I say stop, you stop. Myra's throat tightened. Yes. Rowan inhaled once deep, and the air around him flared red again, the dragon truth pressing closer to the surface. The gate's pull steadied, less chaotic for a moment, as if forced into a narrower channel. Myra ran to the circle's edge, staying outside the painted lines. The heat from it prickled her skin. The key objects vibrated. She did not touch them. She crouched and placed her fingertips just above the paint, feeling the pattern like a current. Her rupture gift latched onto the geometry. This was not a small cuff sigil. This was ancient work, layered with intention. Myra breathed once, twice. On the third breath, she ruptured the conduit. The painted line did not simply break. It unraveled, the glow stuttering and collapsing as if the circle's language had been erased mid-sentence. Light sputtered. The keys flickered, trying to maintain resonance. The gate shuddered, edges trembling. The suction weakened for a heartbeat, like a starving mouth losing strength. Rowan seized that moment. He drove his counter seal forward with visible effort, pushing the gate's mouth inward, compressing the tear like forcing a wound closed. The hook line to Lucian flared again, and Lucian cried out, stumbling as if yanked by an invisible chain. Lucian's face twisted, hatred raw. He tried to claw at the hook, but it held. The gate began to collapse. It did not close gently. It imploded, sucking light, wind, and the remaining ritual energy inward like ash. The floodlights flickered violently. One toppled, dragged by the pull, and slammed into the dock with a burst of sparks. The artifact keys lifted slightly off their cradles, drawn toward the collapsing tier. The coins spun, flashing cold light. The thorn ring vibrated like a living thing. Myra lunged, not to catch them, but to shove them away from the collapsing center so they would not be consumed and lost forever. Her fingers did not touch metal. She used a tool, a broken piece of railing, hooking it under the cradles and flipping them hard. The keys clattered across the dock, skidding away from the gate's pull as the implosion intensified. Morholt screamed something unintelligible, rage and disbelief. Bureau agents dragged him farther back, away from the collapsing edge. Lucian tried again to open a shadow portal. The air around his hand warped. Rowan's voice cut through lethal. No! The hook line snapped taut. Lucian jerked, choking as if the channel itself had become a collar. His portal collapsed. His knees hit the dock. For the first time, Lucian looked frightened. Rowan stepped forward one pace, still holding the seal, still holding the gate's collapse, and spoke with quiet finality. You do not brand anyone again. He made a small motion with his hand, like severing a thread. The hook line between them cut. Lucian gasped, a sound torn from him, and the remaining shadow threads around his hands died, as if power had been drained from the root. The gate's mouth shrank rapidly now, edges knitting inward. The wind eased. The roar faded into an aching silence. Then the tear snapped shut. The sudden absence of suction made the dock feel heavy again. Myra stumbled, catching herself on a metal plate. Her whole body shook, adrenaline draining fast. Rowan swayed once, then he dropped to one knee. Myra ran to him. Rowan's face was pale under the harsh light. The faint echo of the mark burned on his wrist and along his throat like a thin line of embers under skin. His breath came shallow and tight as if every inhale was pain. Myra fell beside him, hands hovering, afraid to touch without permission even now. Rowan, look at me. Rowan's eyes lifted to hers. The cold mask was cracked. He looked exhausted, furious, alive. Myra's voice broke. Can I touch you? Rowan's mouth tightened. Yes. Myra cupped his face with both hands, thumbs along his jaw, feeling the heat of him, the solid reality. Breathe, she whispered. With me, in, out, in, out. Rowan's breath hitched, then followed her rhythm. His eyes stayed locked on her like she was the only stable thing left in the world. You should have let me, Myra whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. You should not have taken it. Rowan's voice was hoarse. You have people, I do not. Myra's chest tightened painfully. You have me. The words came out before she could protect herself from them. She expected him to flinch, to retreat into coldness, to reject. Rowan's gaze sharpened and something dangerously tender moved through it, brief as lightning. Do not say that unless you mean it. Mara's hands trembled on his face. I mean it. Rowan's eyes closed for a second as if he could not afford the feeling. When they opened again, the cold returned partially, armor sliding back into place. But it was conscious now. Chosen, not cruelty. Behind them, Bureau agents moved quickly, securing Morholt, pulling his men into custody, shouting for medical support. Agent Hollies approached, cautious, eyes darting between Mara and Rowan. Hollies stopped a few feet away. Ashford, can you stand? Rowan's jaw tightened. Yes. Hollies looked at Mara. And you, Mara Vale, you are coming with us. Mara's stomach dropped. Even after saving the key, she could still be taken, contained, buried in a cell for being dangerous by blood. Rowan began to rise, slow, controlled, as if every movement cost. Mara stayed close, supporting him with her shoulder, and felt the weight of his arm across her back. The contact made her skin buzz with awareness even through terror. She hated that her body noticed anything but fear. She clung to the fact that noticing meant she was alive. Rowan spoke to Hollies with icy authority. She is under my protection. Hollies' eyes narrowed. That phrase again, it did not go well in the alley. Rowan's gaze did not waver. If you take her now with her throat still resonating from a fractured mark, you risk triggering another response. You do not understand what you would be transporting. Hollies' jaw clenched, forced to accept the logic. Then what do you propose? Rowan looked at Mara, and he did not decide for her. His voice dropped slightly, controlled. Do you want to go with them? Or do you want to come with me and present yourself formally at Crown Hall at noon with counsel? Mara's throat tightened. Choice, real choice, offered in the middle of chaos. It felt unfamiliar, like standing on a floor she expected to collapse. Mara looked past Hollies to where Nina sat wrapped in a bureau blanket, rocking the child. Nina's eyes met Mara's and filled with tears. Mara turned back to Hollies. I will come at noon, with Rowan, and with my witness. Hollies' gaze flicked to Nina. She nodded once reluctant. Noon, if you do not show, I will find you. Rowan's voice was flat. You will not need to. Hollies stepped back and barked orders, directing medics toward Rowan. Rowan waved them away with a curt gesture, but one medic insisted on at least checking his pulse and the burn line on his wrist. Rowan tolerated it with visible impatience. Mara broke away and ran to Nina. Nina stood, swaying, and Mara crashed into her, hugging her hard. Nina clung back just as fiercely. You came, Nina whispered into Mara's hair. Mara's voice cracked. I was so afraid. Nina pulled back and held Mara's face, thumbs brushing tears away. Her gaze dropped to Mara's throat. He marked you. Mara nodded, shame rising. I broke it, but it is still there like an echo. Nina's eyes filled again. You do not belong to him. Mara swallowed. I know. The child clung to Nina's side, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with tears. Mara crouched and held out her hand slowly, gentle, careful. The child hesitated, then placed a small damp hand in hers. Mara's heart clenched. I am sorry, she whispered, though the child did not fully understand the words. I am here. Nina's voice was quiet and fierce. And you are coming home with us. Mara's chest tightened painfully. Home. The word felt like a promise she did not deserve. Mara glanced back toward Rowan. He stood now, tall despite pain, shoulders squared, speaking briefly with a bureau medic. His gaze found Mara immediately, as if he had been tracking her even while pretending he did not need to. Mara held that gaze, and something settled inside her, not peace, but a thread of steadiness. Later, after statements and triage and the grim process of watching Morholt dragged away still cursing, the key emptied. Fog thickened again as floodlights were shut down. The water looked normal now, dark and indifferent, as if it had not nearly swallowed reality. Lucian Crow was gone. Myra did not see him taken. She did not see him cuffed. There were only traces, a smear of blood on the dock, a scorch mark where his shadow portal had tried to form and failed. The absence felt like a new threat, quieter and potentially worse. When Myra spoke the concern aloud, Rowan's voice was calm but hard. He is wounded, he is diminished, but he is alive. Myra's stomach tightened. So he will return. Rowan's eyes did not soften. Yes. Nina shivered beside Myra, holding the child close. Who is he? Myra swallowed. Someone who thought he could own me. Nina's gaze sharpened. He cannot. Myra wanted to believe that completely. She wanted to erase the humiliation of the mark, the way her body had reacted to Lucian's closeness even while her mind recoiled. Trauma made the body treacherous. Lucian had designed it that way. Rowan watched Myra's face as if reading the war inside her. He spoke quietly. You did not enjoy it. Myra stiffened, shame flaring. Do not. Rowan's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. Answer me. Myra swallowed hard. No. Rowan nodded once sharp. Then do not punish yourself for a nervous system responding to threat. He engineered obedience. You broke it. The words hit Myra like a hand on the back, steadying, not comfort, recognition. She exhaled shakily. Thank you. Rowan's mouth tightened slightly, as if he did not like gratitude because it suggested debt. You owe me nothing. The Bureau allowed Rowan to escort Myra and Nina away under strict conditions. Agent Hollies herself stated them, eyes hard. No leaving the city, noon at Crown Hall, full testimony. The keys are evidence. The artifact keys had been secured in a bureau case. Myra watched the case shut and felt a strange grief. Those objects had almost ended everything. They were still beautiful, still dangerous, still part of a machine older than her pain. They left in Rowan's car, Nina and the child in the back, Myra in the front. The ride was quiet. The child fell asleep against Nina's shoulder, exhausted. Myra stared out the window at the city edges. Lights blurred in damp air. Every time she touched her throat, she felt the faint echo of the mark. It no longer pulled her feet, but it still burned if she thought of Lucian, like her skin remembered violation. Rowan spoke without looking at her. You were right to demand boundaries. Myra blinked, surprised. You think so? Rowan's jaw tightened. Power without consent is just another form of violence. The sentence sounded like it had been carved into him by years of regret. Myra's chest tightened. And you, that thing I saw, the shadow. Rowan's eyes stayed on the road. A curse, if you want to call it that, a blood mechanism. The crown bred lines to hold doors shut. Sometimes what holds the door becomes a monster in the dark. Myra's voice was small. Are you a monster? Rowan's answer was immediate. Yes. The bluntness made her inhale sharply. Rowan continued colder, and I choose what I do with it. That is the only morality I trust. Myra looked at his hands on the wheel, steady even now. Tonight you chose to save us. Rowan's voice went quieter. Tonight I chose you. The words hit her like heat under skin. Her breath stumbled. She wanted to ask what that meant. She was afraid of what it meant. Noon at Crown Hall came too quickly. The building rose white and severe, ward lines humming faintly in the stone. Inside, the air smelled like old law and polished floors. People looked at Myra's throat too often. They tried to hide it. They failed. Agent Hollies met them in a chamber lined with seals. Ethan was there too, standing near the back wall, posture controlled, eyes scanning for threats. When Mara saw him, relief flooded her so hard she almost swayed. Ethan's gaze softened. "You made it." Mara nodded, throat tight. "You did too." Nina sat with the child beside her, hands folded, face pale but resolute. She looked like someone who had walked through hell and refused to let it change what she believed about love. The interrogation was not gentle. Hollies presented evidence. The coin, the thorn ring, the contract chain linking Veronica Pike to Moorholt, a list of payments into Greyhaven Home, testimony from a captured dock operative, records of Lucian Crow's involvement with the Umbral Order's leak network. Mara spoke steadily, even when her voice shook. She described the mark, the compulsion, the gate's pull. She described Moorholt's words about harvesting keys. Rowan testified too, voice flat and lethal. He confirmed the nature of living keys. He confirmed the risk to the city. He admitted to using a counter seal that nearly killed him. A council member, face pinched with fear and ambition, leaned forward. "Mara Vale, are you still a key?" Mara's fingers dug into her palm. She forced herself to answer honestly. "My blood is still what it is, but I am not a door handle. I am a person." The council member's expression tightened. "That is not an answer." Rowan's voice cut in like a blade. "It is the only answer that matters." The chamber went tense. Hollies lifted a hand, controlling the room. "We are not here to debate philosophy. We are here because the Abyssal Gate was opened at Cinder Key and then closed. Without Mara Vale, it would not have closed. Without Ashford, it would not have closed." The council members' lips thinned. "So we reward dangerous blood." Hollies' eyes went cold. "We acknowledge reality. Then we build policy that does not repeat Moorholt's crimes." The verdict was not a pardon, not a celebration. It was conditional freedom. Mara would be monitored. The keys would remain under bureau lock. Greyhaven Home would be raided, its administrators arrested, its surviving children relocated under new oversight. Moorholt would face trial for crimes that could not be hidden now that the Gate event had forced the Crown's hand. Mara listened to the legal language and felt something inside her shift anyway. Not triumph, but a loosening of a chain she had worn so long she had stopped noticing the weight. Afterward, in a quiet corridor outside the chamber, Selene Ashford approached Mara. Her face looked older than it had at Ashford Hall, as if one night had scraped away illusions. "You chose," Selene said quietly. Mara's throat tightened. "I did what I had to." Selene shook her head. "No, you chose not to obey the Crown's mechanism. You chose not to obey Moorholt. You chose not to obey Lucian's mark. You chose to remain yourself under pressure that would have broken most." Mara's eyes stung. Praise felt like danger because praise so often came with hooks. "Why are you telling me this?" Selene's gaze flicked toward Rowan at the end of the corridor. He stood with Ethan, speaking in low voices, posture rigid with control. "Because I raised my son to be a weapon. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself he could carry it." Selene's voice shook slightly. "And tonight I watched him carry it for someone other than the Crown." Mara's breath caught. "He nearly died." Selene nodded, pain in her eyes. "Yes, and I think he would do it again." Mara's hand rose to her throat, fingers resting lightly where the echo mark still lived. "What happens now?" Selene's gaze softened by a fraction. "Now you live." That is the part Moorholt never understood. He thought keys only existed to open and close. He never respected the hand that holds them. Mara's laugh came out small and bitter. My hand has been shaking my whole life. Selene looked at her carefully. Then let it shake, and do it anyway. When Selene left, Mara walked down the corridor toward Rowan. Her steps felt strange, like she was learning how to move without being pulled by someone else's leash. Rowan turned as she approached. His expression was composed again, the cold mask back in place. But his eyes tracked her throat briefly, then her face, and she felt that familiar jolt of being seen. Ethan moved away discreetly, giving them space without being asked. Myra stopped in front of Rowan. "They are monitoring me?" Rowan's voice was flat. "Yes," Myra swallowed. "They did not imprison me." Rowan nodded once. "They cannot pretend you are only a threat when you saved their city." Myra's fingers twisted together. "Lucian escaped." Rowan's gaze sharpened. "Yes," Myra exhaled, shaking. "So it is not over." Rowan's voice dropped colder. "No, but you are no longer alone." The words hit her harder than he seemed to realize. Myra's mouth tightened as she tried not to cry again. She was so tired of crying. Rowan watched her struggle. Then he spoke in the same controlled tone he used before violence, except this time it was aimed inward. "Mara, you do not have to decide anything today. But I will ask you one question." Mara's pulse jumped. "What?" Rowan's eyes held hers. "Do you want to stay near me?" Mara's throat tightened. The question was simple. The answer was not. Staying near Rowan meant staying near danger. It meant staying near a man who could be a cage if he chose, who carried a monster in his blood and wore coldness like a blade. It meant admitting that the heat she felt around him was real, that her body responded not only to threat but to him, the way he held himself back, the way he asked, the way his rare tenderness felt like something sacred because it was chosen. Myra whispered, honest as she could be. "I am still afraid of you." Rowan nodded. "Good." Myra blinked, startled. Rowan's voice stayed calm. "Fear keeps you awake. I do not want you asleep around me. Not until you are sure." Myra's chest ached. "And you?" "Are you sure?" Rowan's mouth tightened. "I am sure of my danger." "That is not what I asked," Myra said, voice trembling. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly, almost reluctantly. "I am sure I want you alive." Myra's breath hitched. Rowan continued, cold and precise as if carving the truth into something manageable. "I am sure I will not touch you without consent. I am sure I will not trade you. I am sure I will not let anyone take you if I can stop it." Mara's eyes filled. She hated how much she needed those words. She also knew need could become another chain if she let it, so she chose carefully. "I want to stay," Mara said, "not because you are my only option, because I am choosing it." Rowan's gaze sharpened, something like relief flashing so quickly it was almost invisible. "Then come with me," Mara swallowed. "Where?" Rowan's voice was steady. "Eidolon City, my residence is warded. Your friends can visit. Nina can visit. Ethan can visit." "You will not be isolated." Mara nodded slowly. The fact he named her people mattered. It meant he was not trying to make her dependent on him. Rowan hesitated, then asked, voice low, "May I put my hand on your waist?" Mara's body reacted immediately, heat and tension. She forced herself to breathe and listen to her own mind, not only her skin. "Yes," she said. Rowan's hand settled at her waist, firm and warm through fabric, a possessive placement that did not push her, did not trap her, simply held her in a way that acknowledged she could step away if she chose. The contact made Mara's stomach flip, desire and fear twisting together. Rowan leaned slightly closer, not touching more, not taking, just near enough that she felt the temperature shift between their bodies. His voice was almost a whisper. If at any point you want distance, say it. Myra nodded, throat tight. I will. Rowan's hand stayed where it was, still, controlled, waiting. Myra surprised herself by stepping closer instead of away. Her forehead nearly brushed his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, strong despite what it had endured. She exhaled shakily and let her fingers rest lightly on his coat, not gripping, just acknowledging. Rowan's breath hitched once, subtle. Myra whispered, barely audible. I hate that I was made into a key. Rowan's voice was low. So do I, Myra's eyes closed. I keep expecting someone to pull a string inside me and make me move. Rowan's hand tightened slightly, then loosened, restraining himself. Then we will cut every string we find. Myra opened her eyes and looked up at him. Even if one of them is me wanting you. Rowan went very still. His gaze turned darker, more intense, and for a moment she saw how frightening he could be if he stopped holding back. Then he spoke with brutal honesty. Want is not a chain. Not if it is chosen. Myra's breath caught. Her skin felt too sensitive, every nerve awake. She could have lifted her face, could have sought his mouth, could have tested how far the heat would go. She did not yet. She wanted the choice to remain hers, not stolen by adrenaline and aftershock. She stepped back half a pace, just enough to look at him clearly. Take me to Eidolon City, Rowan nodded. I will. That evening, Myra returned briefly to Nina's small home to gather a few things. The child was asleep, finally, with a nightlight glowing on the dresser. Nina moved quietly through the kitchen, hands still shaking slightly as she made tea. Trauma lived in the smallest motions. Nina handed Myra a mug. Are you leaving tonight? Myra nodded. Yes. Nina searched Myra's face. Do you trust him? Myra's throat tightened. She thought of Rowan asking before touching her. She thought of him offering her a choice in front of Holly's. She thought of him nearly dying to take the mark away from her. I trust what he chooses to be, Myra said softly, and I trust myself to leave if he stops choosing it. Nina's eyes filled. She nodded. That is the right answer. Myra swallowed. I am sorry you were pulled into my world. Nina's voice was fierce and gentle at once. You were pulled into mine too. Love is not clean. Myra's eyes burned. She set her mug down and hugged Nina tightly. Nina hugged back, strong, anchoring. When Myra left, she did not feel cured. The mark's echo still tingled. Her nightmares were not magically erased, but she walked out the door without looking over her shoulder every second, and that alone felt like a kind of victory. Rowan waited outside in the car. He watched her approach, expression unreadable. When she got in, he did not reach for her automatically. He asked, Are you ready? Myra looked at the city lights ahead, at the road that would lead to Eidolon, at whatever came next, and felt fear rise like a tide. She placed her fingers lightly on her throat over the faint echo of Lucian's violation. Then she lowered her hand and let it rest on her own thigh, grounding herself in her body as her own. I am ready, Myra said. Rowan started the engine and pulled into the night traffic. As the city moved around them, Myra watched reflections slide across the windshield. She thought of Greyhaven, of Morholt's gloves, of Lucian's cold smile, of the gate's mouth opening over the water. She thought of Nina's embrace. She thought of Rowan's hand at her waist, firm and waiting, asking. For the first time in a long time, Myra felt a strange, unfamiliar thing settle in her chest, not safety, not certainty, but something close to agency. The road ahead was dark, and she knew there would be more traps, more politics, more ghosts, and Lucian somewhere in the shadows licking his wounds. But tonight she was not walking on a leash. Tonight she was moving because she chose to move. And when her mind finally dipped toward sleep in the passenger seat, the nightmare did not come with fingers on her throat. It came with the memory of her own voice, steady in the wind at Cinder Key, saying I chose myself and meaning it. If you discovered your blood could open something world-ending, and someone you don't fully trust was the only one who could protect you, would you run? Or would you stay and set your own rules?